Hi, boys and girls. Happy Sunday. It's nice seeing you again. Welcome joining into the Tomato Cube MakeCode Arcade learning session. Last week in Chapter 5, we learned 3 programming concepts. The first one was variable, and then you learned about some simple mathematical operation. And the last concept you learned was condition. So we use this programming concept a lot in our real programming world. So today I'm going to show you 2 more programming concepts. So let's check it out. Alright, today we will learn the 4th programming concept, which is the array, and then we're gonna learn the other one, which is loop. And then at the end of the session, we will utilize the loop, array, and variable to add an image selection inside your game. So what I mean by that, just stay tuned. Okay, so the 4th programming concept we are learning today is array. But before we get into array, let's take a look at variable, the programming concept we learned in last chapter. If you recall, variable is like a container that we can use to store value. It's just like the box that you can see here on the right hand side. We use container or variable to store the value inside. However, there is one limitation with variable because we can only store one value. So if you take last week's example, we have a variable called favorite food, which is Dino's favorite food, and we store one value for it, which is pizza. It is okay if Dino only have one favorite food, but what if Dino has more than one favorite food? How do we store multiple values in MakeCode Arcade? So besides pizza, we might want to store ice cream, apple, burger, satay, and etc. So how do you do that? That's when we're gonna utilize the new programming concept that we learned today, which is array. Array is like a train where you can have multiple containers in it. In this example that you're looking at, this train has one container. So in this one container, or the first container, we store value pizza in it. And since we need to store more than one value, so we add another container and we store value ice cream in it. So in the event, if you need to add more value into the array, you just need to add another container. And you can keep adding more and more container to store all the values that you need inside this array. So how do we do that in MakeCode Arcade? Let's take a look. Over here on my MakeCode Arcades, I have a very simple game where the Dino can move around the platform, jump around, and navigate around. So what I have on my workspace here is, inside the onStart block, I have a set background color, and I set it to white color, which is why you can see that the background is in white. And then I also created a tile map, which is the scene that you're looking at here. If you click inside, you can see that I have created some platform, some ground, water, and a treasure at the very end. I've also added wall for my tile map so that my Dino can stand on it. Then coming back here, the 3rd block I have is I created a sprite, a player sprite that looks like a dinosaur. And then I also set a gravity for my dinosaur so that it gets pulled to the ground by using the acceleration Y. And then I also have the block to allow me to move Dino to the left and right. So I have disabled the VY so that it won't go up and down by using the directional button. And then of course I will let the camera to follow my sprite, which is why you can see that as I move around, the camera or the display actually move along with it as well. And then over here I have an on block that's saying that in the event if my player touches the water, then the game will be over. And then the other on block says that if my player touches the treasure, then the game wins. Then I have 2 button control here. The first one, pressing A, will have a velocity of -100, which is the jumping effect that you're seeing here. And then on B button press, then Dino will say something. So this is what we did last week. We set a variable called favorite food, and we assign a value pizza to it. And this button B, what it does is it will let the Dino to display out the text inside this variable. or the value inside this variable, which is pizza. Alright, so if you need help to recall how to create this scene over here, and also how does all these buttons or acceleration works, make sure you check out the previous chapter, the chapter 3, which we talk about how to create the scene, and chapter 4, which we talk about how to create the motion and also the button control for the game. In chapter 5, we learned about variable, which is this block over here. So today we are going to show you how to create an array where you can store multiple values. So to create an array, you can expand the advanced category. You can see that there's one array category here. Click on it. You can see that under the create, there's two sets, one set text list, one set normal list, which is the number. So in our case, we want to store multiple text value. So I will choose the second one. Alright, so inside here I have an array of A, B, C, so I can fill up the value that we want to store. In our case, we want to store in pizza, and then the next value we want to store ice cream, and the third value apple. And if you want to add more value, there's a plus sign here. Click on it, then you can keep on adding more value. Let me add one more, burger. And don't forget to give your variable, the array variable, a name. I'm gonna rename the text list to food list. And since array contain a list of items, normally we want to give the name that contain lists. So in this case, it is a list of food, so I'm gonna call it food list. By giving a good variable name, it helps us to identify what is that object. So in this case, if I see a list, I know that immediately this is an array. Alright, so now that I have a simple array with 4 values inside, how do I retrieve the value from this array? So let's say if I want to display the value pizza or the ice cream from this food list array, how do I do that? Let's go back to the slides. When we are looking at array, we always refer to an index number. So the first container that we have inside the array is having an index number 0. And then the second container that we have will have an index number 1. The third container will have 2. Fourth container will have index 3. Fifth container will have index 4. Sixth container will have index 5, so on and so forth. So you might notice that index always start from 0. So the first container or the first item that we have in array always start from index number 0. So imagine just now we have an array that called food list. So food list has multiple values that we put inside. We have pizza, ice cream, apple, and burger. So let's say we say, what is the food list index 1? The value for food list index 1 will be ice cream. The next question will be, what is the food list number 7? Number 7 means the 8th container, which is the papaya. And then we can also ask, how many items are there inside the food list array? Or what is the length of food list? The answer would be 8. Alright, so let's try to utilize the knowledge of index and also the length of a food list into our MakeCode Arcade. So over here on my MakeCode Arcade, in order to retrieve the value, I'm going to utilize the index. So go to arrays, and there's this block here that says list get value at. The value at here that's saying 0, this is where I put my index number. So let me drag it out, and let me zoom out here. So on B button press, Dino will say I love favorite food. In this case, I wanted to say pizza, the first item from the food list. So I will drag this away and put in the array list get value. List here is food list, so I will change that to food list get value at index 0. Let me press B. You can see that I love pizza. And then if I change the value to 1 and I press B, now it says ice cream. Okay, so the value that we put inside here is the index. So it always starts from 0. So in this case, we have 0 for pizza, 1 for ice cream, 2 for apple, and 3 for burger. Okay, so let me try to get Dino to say out all the value from the array. I'm going to start from 0, and in between, don't forget to add a pause so that we can see the text being displayed on the screen before we move forward to the next text. So here, I'm going to duplicate this pause block here, and I'm going to keep repeating this for all the value inside the array. Okay, that should be it. So I have 0, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, let me hit B. I love pizza. I love ice cream as well. And then I love apple. And finally, I love burger. Okay, so that's how we can retrieve the value from the array. And just now we mentioned about length. So let's get Dino to voice out the length. So I love how many types of food? Types of food. So instead of food list get value, I'm going to utilize another block from the array category. There's this block says length of array. So drag that in. And then Dino going to say, I love 4 types of food. So length of array food list. Then remember to add a pause as well in between. It's going to start by saying, I love 4 types of food. There you go. And then the first one is I love pizza, love ice cream, apple, and then finally burger. In the event you need to add value to the array, you can utilize another block under the array category, which is under the modify, and there's one block that say list add value to n. So let me drag this one out and place it after the set food list and say set food list add value to n. So what value? There will be a text value, so I'm gonna drag out the text block and put it in here and say satay. Alright, let me press B and see what happens. So now we become 5 types of food. So the length is automatically being reflected as we display it. And as we go through the B button press, we need to add another say down here to show the value for the 4th index array. Okay, let me hit B. I love 5 types of food. Pizza, ice cream, apple, burger, and finally the satay. Okay, and of course you can also add the value by using the plus sign here, and you just add the value at the end over here. But in the event if you need to add the value at the front of the array instead, then you can utilize the block under the array category. There's another one that actually say list insert at beginning. So let me drag that in. Let me move this away and say food list. Let me copy this text block. And for this one, we can say papaya. Alright, let's watch what happened. Let me press B. I love 6 types of food. And I love papaya first. Then pizza. Then ice cream. And all the way to satay. So what's happening is, inside the array, at the first block that we drag in just now is to add a value to n. So add satay value to n, basically we add another container to the array. And now the length of the container will become 5. And then when we do add or insert papaya at the beginning, basically we are shifting the whole array to the back. And then we'll slot in a new container and put a value papaya inside. Alright, so that's how we can utilize array to help us to store multiple values, and that's how we retrieve the different value inside the array. The next programming concept, number 5, is loop. So what is loop? So imagine you have a robot to help you to perform your day-to-day tasks. For instance, on Monday, you have a robot that will do laundry for you at 9 AM. And then at 12 p.m. the robot will start cooking, and then at 4 p.m. he will start cleaning. And then the same thing repeat for Tuesday. 9 a.m. laundry, 12 p.m. cooking, and then in the evening 4 p.m. cleaning. Wednesday, same thing. Thursday, same thing. 9 a.m. laundry, 12 p.m. cooking, and then cleaning. And lastly, Friday, the robot does the same thing as well. 9 a.m. laundry, 12 p.m. cooking, and then finally in the evening, 4 p.m. cleaning. And then on Saturday, the robot is not working anymore, so it's resting. And then Sunday as well, robot is resting. So we know that from Monday to Friday, we give an instruction, or which is the code, to the robot, say that, hey, 9 a.m. wakes up and do the laundry. And then we also give the second set of instruction that say 12 p.m. cooking. And then in the evening, 4 p.m. cleaning. So these are the codes that we wrote for the robot to perform the tasks that we wanted to do. And did you know that we don't have to write these sets of code 5 times for Monday to Friday? For Monday to Friday, they are the same task, so we just need to write it once because we can utilize something called loop. So what is loop? Loops help us to tell the computer to repeat a sequence of instruction until a specific condition is met. So in our robot scenario just now, we have a sequence of instruction, which are the codes that we wrote: 9 a.m. laundry, 12 p.m. cooking, and 4 p.m. cleaning. So this is a sequence of instruction. And using loop, we can ask the computer to repeat them until the condition is met. And the condition here is from Monday to Friday. Okay, so for today's session, we are not gonna show you how to write the code for the robots. Instead, let's take a look at the code that you just wrote for the array. So in the array code that we created just now, we asked Dino to say, I love the food that he likes. So, which is the pizza, the ice cream, etc. So you can see that we have a bunch of code here that is being repeated. So it's the same code, but we write it multiple times. The 0 for the first index, 1 for the second index, right? So these codes are repeated, and we can reduce the number of codes by using loop. This is a loop, the green color block here that say for index from 0 to 5, and inside there we just need to have one line of code that say Dino says I love food, and return the value based on the index. So in this case, it's the index from 0 to 5, so the first iteration will be 0. It will return the value for index equals to 0. Then it will look again to the second iteration, which is number 1. So it will return the value for index number 1. And it will keep repeating until it reaches a condition, which is 5. So in this case, as you can see, with loop, it helps us to reduce code redundancy. So instead of multiple lines of codes here, we just need one line of code. And then it's easier to maintain because you have lesser code now, and it's easier for you to modify if you needed to. Alright, so let's try this out in our MakeCode Arcade. Let's change our code from multiple lines of codes to a simple loop. Alright, so in my on B button press here, I'm gonna remove all these codes out of it and bring in a loops block. The loops block, the one that I'm gonna use is this one here for index from 0 to 4. So drag it inside my on B button press, and since I have 6 items in my array, so I'm gonna do from 0 to 5, so which is a total of 6 items. And then I'm gonna just drag one set of these codes here. So I'm gonna drag this one in, and don't forget the pause as well. So instead of 5 sets, I just need 1 set of this code. And say, Dino say I love food list get value at, instead of number 4, I'm gonna utilize the index, because this index represents the index value for each iteration. So when it's iteration number 1, the index will be 0. And as the second round, it will increase and become 1. Then third round will become 2. And the fourth round will become 3. So I can use this index directly by dragging it and put it on top of the value 4. Alright, so let's try out the code. Let me hit B. I love 6 types of food, and now it's the loop. I love papaya, the second loop pizza, third loop ice cream, apple, and the end should be burger, and of course satay. Okay, so I just need one set of code like this. It's a lot shorter than what I used to have previously. As you can see, computer is very good in performing repetitive tasks. It's not the same for human. Like us, it's very hard for us to do the same thing the exact same way for many times. For example, if you ask me to draw a mountain, the first time I draw it and then the second time when I draw it, it will be a little bit different from the first time. So we are not good at repeating the same task over and over again. However, computer is really good at that. They can do the exact same instruction that you ask it to do for many times. So that's the use of loops. We use loops to help us to repeat the instruction. And there are many types of loops. The one that you just saw is the first type, where we uses the index number from 0 to whatever number that we set at the value box here. And of course, the index here will give us the index number for the current iteration, just like what we showed you earlier on. And then the second type of loops looks like that. It's called for element loops. So this loop repeats the instruction for every element in the array. The value that you see here, it gives us the value directly for the array of current iteration. And of course, the list is whatever array that we want to loop. How about we go back to the MakeCode Arcade and change our code to use the for element loop block. Alright, so in this case, let me go ahead and remove the for loops from the on B button press and replace it with another type of loops, which is the for element loops. Let me drag it in. So for element value of list, the list here will be the food list. Okay, so for each of the elements inside the food list, I'm going to do the same action as we have previously in the for loop. So let me just go ahead and copy them, both the 𝐷𝐷𝐻 and the pause. So for this 𝐷𝐷𝐻, there's one thing different from the previous for loop. Instead of saying food list get value at index, I can use the value directly, because the value over here return the value for the current iteration. So I don't need to get value again. So let me just go ahead and remove this block and replace the value on top of the text directly. So this value will be the value of the array based on the current iteration. So the first iteration will return the value of the first array, which is the papaya, and then it will follow by pizza, subsequently ice cream, so on and so forth. Okay, let's try it out. I have 6 types of food, papaya, ice cream, so it's going through these 4 element loops right now. And the end should be satay. So you have learned 2 types of loops, and then the subsequent loops, the third type, this loop doesn't utilize any array, meaning that it doesn't iterate according to the number of items that you have inside an array. In fact, what it does is it just repeat the number of times that you specify here inside the value box, and it will perform whatever instruction that you put inside the block. So it will just keep repeating the instruction based on the number of times that you have inside this value block here. So it's pretty straightforward. And then the 4th types of loops also doesn't use any array. It's using a condition. It's called while loop. What it does is it will check if the condition is true. If the condition is true, then it will run the instruction, and then it will keep repeating it until the condition is no longer true. So while means while the condition is still true, then do the action inside the block. Otherwise, stop performing the instruction. This polygon here that you see, the false polygon here, is where we define the condition with the Boolean operator that we learned in the last chapter. And in fact, we can perform the same thing. Although while loop doesn't utilize array, we can use it to mimic what we did previously with the array. Let me show you. Alright, inside my on B button press, let me remove the 4-element loop that I created just now and replace it with the while loop. And before I start creating the condition for the while loop, I need to create a new variable to keep track of my current index, because while loop doesn't utilize any array. So we need to have a way to explicitly keep track of the number of index. So I need to create a new variable for that. So let me go ahead and make a variable, and I'm gonna call that current index, meaning the current iteration's index number. So I'm gonna set that current index to 0 before the while loop. Before it gets into the while loop, the current index is 0. And then the condition inside my while loop would be a comparison. I'm gonna say while the current index is smaller or equals to 5, because I have 6 items in my array that start from 0, so it's all the way to 5. So for each iteration, I'm gonna increase my index by 1. So I have to do this manually. It's different from the for loop. In for loop, we don't have to increase the index by 1 for each iteration. It's being done automatically. But when I'm doing it in the while loop, I have to handle that explicitly. I have to increase the current index by 1. And similarly, inside the block, I'm gonna do the same thing as I do with the for loop, which is _say, and also the pause block. Okay, so let me repeat this. So I'm gonna start my code with set current index to 0, and then while current index, which is 0 as of this point, is smaller or equal to 5, perform whatever instruction that we have inside this code, which is _say. I love the food list, add current index, and then pause, and after that it's gonna increase the index by 1. So now index become 1, so it go back and check again. Current index, which is 1, is still smaller or equal to 5, so it will perform the action inside here. And then on the second iteration, the current index increase again, so now it become 2, and then it will check again, is current index 2 smaller or equal to 5, is smaller or equal to 5, so you continue to do it until the current index become 6. Then it will check again, hey, current index is 6, it is no longer smaller or equals to 5. So it will stop performing this block and exit. Okay, so let's try this code out. Let me hit B. I have 6 types of food. The first one is papaya. And then go to the second iteration, the iteration, 4, 5 iterations, and the 6 iterations. Okay, so now it stops because it no longer fulfills the condition over here. Okay, so this is a simple way of using while loop. Now that you see how while loop can be constructed, you might be wondering what is the difference between all these different type of loops, because we have while loop that perform the same exact things as the for index loop as well as the for element loop. So what are their difference? So if you look at the first one, the for element loop, it says for element value of food list. So basically it's going through everything or every item inside the array list. And the advantage of using that is we don't have to define the index number as we go through each iteration. So automatically when we say for element value of food list, it will iterate through the entire array list. So if we want to have a loop that goes through an array list, this will be a perfect option. However, there is also time that you do not want to loop through an entire array list. You might just want to go through the first 3 items inside the array list, or sometimes you just want to have a counter or index that go from number 0 to a certain number. So it's not necessary that you need to iterate through array list. That's when you can use the second option, which is the for index from 0 to a maximum number that defined by you. So that's the major difference between the first for loop and the second for loop. So the first for loop will go through an array list and you'll go through every items, whereas the second one is depends on what you define at the maximum value over here, and it's not necessary that you're using it on array. You can use it on other scenario as well. Whereas the last item that you see here, the while loop is used differently. If you want to use it on array, the index needs to be defined explicitly. But the key usage of a while loop is that it allows you to define a condition. So it doesn't depend on the array. You can create a Boolean operator or more complex conditions inside this while loop. For instance, you can have a scenario that you want your game to keep showing certain effect until a certain conditions reach. Maybe when it's a nighttime, then you want to stop that effect, and if it's still a daytime, then you want to show a different effect. So it really depends on whatever condition that you set. So while loop is perfect for that scenario. Okay, so these are the 3 different loops that we introduced today. There are some other blocks that you see inside the loop category. They are slightly different from the loop that you've seen earlier on. For instance, this forever loop, as you can see, it doesn't have any condition. So it will just keep running in your coding. And there's also one more thing. You can see the shape of the block is a standalone block. So it will run independently from the game update, and it will keep running and repeating the codes that you have inside this block at the background. And there's no conditions that you need to define, as I mentioned just now. And then there's another block that you see inside the loop category, which is onStart. And of course, onStart is not a loop. It's in there just in case you accidentally delete the onStart block, which were created initially in the workspace. You can drag it in from the loop category. So the instruction inside the onStart block is the first set of code that will get executed when the program starts. So when we power up our console or when we first run our program, the computer will first go to the onStart block to execute all the instructions inside the onStart block sequentially. And it will only be executed once. So it's not a loop, you will not keep running it, it will only be executed once. Alright, so now you learn about the array. You have also learned about the loop. I think it will be a good idea. Let's put both of our knowledge together to add something more interesting to the Dino game that you saw earlier on. So what I have over here is, we already know Dino have multiple different type of favorite food. So what if we let the player to choose at the beginning of the scene to choose a number, and that would determine the type of food that will show on the game. So for instance, if you choose number 0, it will show pizza. If you choose number 2, it will show the drumstick, or etc. So it depends on the number that you pick. It will change the food that is being displayed in the game. So that will utilize the knowledge in array as well as the loop. So let's take a quick look. How do we do that? But before that, let me clarify a little bit more on array. So far, you have already used array to store multiple values in terms of string and also number. But do you know that array can be used to store all variable types? So not just number and string. It can also be used to store sprite. So what you are seeing here is an array of sprites, different sprite objects, and I can put it inside the array variable. I can also store tiles. In this case, I'm storing the location for all these X tile. And then the array can also use to store images. So you can see here, I have a different images inside this array. So array can be used to store all variable types, not just number and string. But there's one condition. If you define the array to be, for instance, an image array, then you can only store image inside the array. You cannot mix them up. So if this is a number array, we can only store number in it. So we cannot mix up number and string together. Alright, for our challenge just now, we wanted to create a game that we are going to have a different image or different type of food based on the player selection. So I'm gonna create a few arrays to help us to do that. The first step is we need to create an array that store multiple images of the food. And then after that, we also need an array to store all the locations where you want to place the food. So in our tile map, we will need to mark the locations that we want to place the food later on. And then we're going to use the array to store all this tile location. And then of course, we will need a screen to prompt the user to choose the number of the food, or which is the index that we are going to choose from the array to show on the screen. And lastly, once we have all these arrays and also the selected food index, we need to use a for loop to go through all this tile location to display or to create a sprite on top of this tile location. Alright, so let's go back to MakeCode Arcade. Alright, let me go ahead and remove the block that we don't need anymore. And I don't need on B button press as well. Okay, so now let's create the first thing, which is the array that will store all the images for the different type of food. So to create an array for images, I can go to array and just drag one of this set array into my onStart block. And instead of array of the string A, B, C, I'm going to replace that with image. So to get the image block, we go to the image category and drag out this image block over here and place it on top of the string directly. Okay, I'm going to duplicate that and do the same for B and C. So make sure all the items inside this array is from the same variable type. In this case, my variable type is image. And remember to rename it to something that is more meaningful. So I'm going to rename text list to food image list. Okay, and let's choose our image. So let's say first one, we can choose the pizza. And then the second one, I can go with the ice cream. Then the third one is apple. And you can keep adding more if you want to. So let me go ahead and add 6 of them. So let me go ahead and duplicate the image block. Okay, so the fourth one, we can make it into a cake. Maybe a smaller cake like this. Okay, and then we can have a drumstick as well. And the last one, how about a taco? Okay. So we have 6 different images to choose from inside the food image list array. Now the second things that we want to create are the location where we want to place this food on the map. So I need to go back to the tile map over here and place a tile on this map to indicate where you want your food sprite to appear on the screen. Over here, I can just go ahead create a small tile. Let's say I just put a square and just a simple one. It doesn't matter what it is because I'm going to replace that by placing a sprite on it. So I'm going to go ahead and just mark it on the map wherever you want the food to be. Maybe some here and then one more over here. Then hit done. Okay, so now that my map has a tile that is being marked as the location for the food, I'm going to collect the positions or the locations of this tile into an array. So similar thing, I'm going to go to arrays and drag one of this create array block. And then instead of array of ABC, in the scene category, there is a block that will automatically return all the locations for a specific tile. Here you go. There's one that say array of all locations. So I'm gonna grab that and drop it on top of the array directly. And then I can throw away this old array. So array of all the pink color square locations that I've just marked inside my tile map just now. Okay, and instead of text list, let me just rename that to food location list. Okay, so now I have my food images, I have my foot location, I need to create a screen to allow the user to choose the index of the foot image that they want to display on this tile. So to do that, we can create another variable. This is not an array, because when users select a foot type or an index, there's only one value being written. So it's just a normal variable. So let me create a new variable that says selected index. Okay, and then I'm gonna set this selected index at the beginning of the game. So I'm gonna drag it all the way to the top in my onStart block. Set selected, oops, I have a typo here, so let me rename that. Selected index. Okay, so selected index will be a prompt to the user. So there's a prompt block that we can use from game that say ask for number, because index is a number. So I'm gonna go ahead and say ask for number, and whatever that I type in here will show up on the screen. So let me just say pick a number. Okay, so you can see in my simulator it shows a screen that say pick a number, and right now number has multiple digits, so let me just change it to 1 digit. Okay, so you can navigate around this number pad over here and choose the number that we want to display. So let's say if I choose 3, I just hit A and then go down to OK to move on. Or if I want to erase the number that I have selected, I can just hit B to erase it. Okay, so this is the function has already been created in MakeCode Arcade to allow our game to take in an input from the user. So in this case, the input is a number. Okay, so now we have performed 3 steps. We have the image array, we have the location array, and we also have the selected index. So let's create a for loop to go through the location list and slowly populate the image one by one on each of this location. So since the location list is an array, so I'm going to utilize the for element loop. So for every items in my foot locations, or for all the location inside this foot location list, I want to create a foot sprite uses the image that user has selected. So let me go ahead and create a new sprite, and I'm gonna call this sprite as Dino foot, and it's gonna look like the image that the user has selected. So I'm gonna go ahead and use the array get value. So list get value at, this will be the foot image, get value at, that will be the selected index that we have at the beginning of kind foot. Okay, so I'm gonna set Dino foot, which is a foot sprite, or I'm gonna create a new Dino foot sprite of a sprite object, and the image will look like the image that the user has selected based on the array index. Okay, and then let's place this sprite on top of the locations that we are looping. To do that, there is an option inside the scene that say place my sprite on top of tile map location. So let me drag this one out and place it here. So I'm gonna place Dino foot on top of the value, because the value of this foot location list is the tile locations, so I can use it directly. Alright, and of course, now that we already placed a sprite on top of this particular tile list, we can remove the square pink tile from the map. So let me go ahead and remove that as well. I'm gonna say set an empty tile on top of this tile location. Alright, so let's see what happened. Let's say I have 6 items, so I'm gonna go ahead and choose 2, and index 2 should be an apple. So let's see if it works. Oh, I made a mistake here. So it says for element value of list, so it has to be a foot location list. So don't forget to change that. make sure we are looping the correct array. So for each of the element inside the food location list, go ahead and create a sprite and then place the sprite on top of that location. And also remember to set that locations to be a transparent tile again. So let me try it out again. Gonna hit OK. Let's see if the apple shows up. Okay, now apple shows up. All looking good. So let's try another one. So let me refresh and let me choose maybe 4. What is 4? 4 is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 should be a drumstick. So let's see if that works. Hit OK. Yep, drumstick, very huge. A giant drumstick just show up. Okay, so my selection is working. So let's finish the game. Right now, as you can see, when I go around, even if I touches the drumstick, the dinosaur doesn't eat it, or you can see there's no points being collected. So let's go ahead and write the remaining code so that the dinosaur can collect the food as well as collecting point for each of the food that he collected. So in order to do that, I will need an on block to say that when dinosaur touches the food sprite, then destroy the sprite as well as increase the score by 1 point. So for event, we learned that in chapter 2. Under the sprite category, we have a on sprite of kind player overlap other sprite. So drag that in, and the other sprite of kind would be the food kind, right? Because we created the dino food as a food kind over here. So on sprite of player overlap other sprite of food kind, then we will destroy the food, make it disappear from the screen. So the destroy the food here will be the other sprite. So let me replace that. Let me throw that one away. And lastly, we need to increase the score by 1. So that will be under info and change score by 1. Alright, let's try it out. Let me choose number 3 this time. Let's see what is it. Oops, I just collected one food accidentally. Now let me collect the second one. Okay, it's working. The cake disappeared and my score is increasing. Okay, so I have completed a very simple game here. And what I did differently with my game this time is I have added the usage of loop and array, and that allowed me to come up with the options for the user to choose the type of food that they want to display in the game. Okay, it's time to build your own. So can you use the same method that you learned today to create an option to choose how your player looks? So what we did is we choose how our food look. So can you do the same thing to choose how you want your player looks like? You can look like a dino, like a ghost, a policeman, and etc. So there's so many type of character. Let's go ahead and create the options so that you add more fun to your game. Alright, a quick recap of what we learned today. What is the use of the array? We use array to help us to store multiple values. And by using the index number, we can access each of the item inside the array so that we can change the value or retrieve the value. What are the type of objects can we store inside an array? Any variable type, which includes number, string, sprite object, tile, and image. But remember, we can only store one type in each array. What is a loop? A loop is used when we want to repeat an instruction until the condition is met. So in our case, we use loop to iterate through an array, and we also use the loop to help us to repeat an action without needing to write the code again. Alright, so these are the 2 programming concepts that we learned today. Next week will be the last part of our programming concept, the part 3, and we will do it at the same time at 2 p.m. on Sunday. Alright, see you guys next week.